a 40-minute race, set to have a whole lot of stuff to worry about if you are these racers. Have to worry about the pit stop. Inside your screen, switched his attention to the massive pack of race cars that's going to blow his doors off and blow off the starter stand. The green flag is down, the drivers are on their way. Locked throughout this race, the grass and the gravel that lines this racetrack. It's old school, so it doesn't have a whole lot of asphalt runoff area. He's a very talented racer of his own. These two fast. He grabs very early on into this race. Look at Danny Wood on a big crash, heading through turn number 1. That's chasing that turn number 4. And here we go, side-by-side racing off into the corner. This can usually end in tears. One of these drivers is going to have to back out of it. That's going to be Randall. But Maunz still allowing some room coming out of the corner. The side-by-side going up the hill through turn number 6. Spade coming out of the corner. Walker, the Canadian, in the number 96. They are banging doors, heading into the braking zone for the final time. They're linked together. That or you put a qualifying fuel load in either way. Getting a whole lot of pressure side by side with himself, and that is...
He's now coming out of the pits. Let's see what his pit lane time is, because this is going to be very important when Yanchi wins.
I don't know what to say. Oh, there's Brett Cathcart upside down. And another driver coming in. That's Jeff Jacobson upside down. Oh, boy. Well, hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Slow Motion Broadcasting, and welcome back to the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. This is round number 9 of the season, coming to you today from Suzuka. My name is Adam Thompson. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Randall McGrew, and in the virtual production hauler, we have Guido Marzucchi. Ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't tune into the Donington Park broadcast 1 week ago, Adam tried to do the open as I usually do, so today I will be Adam for this broadcast. But we enter the final quarter of this Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors season by taking a trip to Japan. Suzuka is an iconic circuit in the world of motorsports. Originally constructed as a test circuit for Honda back in 1962, Suzuka has become a staple of not only Japanese motorsports, not only Asian motorsports, but global motorsports as a whole. Randall, I absolutely adore Suzuka, but in these Spec Racer Fords, it's a rather tenuous drive.
Who doesn't love Suzuka, honestly? And if you don't love Suzuka, that's a problem with you. This is one of the best tracks in the world. If you can be fast at Suzuka, you can be fast just about anywhere. This track has everything you could ask for: elevation changes, technical sections, high-speed sections. The corner they're going through right now is nearly flat in these Spec Racer Fords, so we're going to have one heck of a race here today.
I think we may end up doing an onboard lap with Jason Green JG2, which you can catch every single Tuesday night over on the Ray Esports YouTube channel on the Racing Line podcast. So let's see who is going to be the fastest driver in this qualifying session as we take this ride on board lap with Jason Green, heading his way down into turn number 1 and 2, the opening series of corners around this track. It is absolutely iconic. That first series of corners really tough, but now this is the tire torture chamber of the S's through turn number 3 into turn number 4. These tires at this point probably a little bit uncomfortable. Now into turn number 5, these S's. You look at a lap in a Formula 1 car around this track, and feels like they're going through here at about twice the speed of sound. Here in these Spec Racer Fords, though, they are wheeling these things around. That's turn number 7 that we just saw Jason Green go through right now. And despite the fact he is still turning, it feels like a bit of a break considering what happened a couple of moments ago. This is turn number 8 into the Degner curves. Now at the bottom end of the circuit into turn number 9 under the bridge. That is right before 130R. We'll talk about that corner in a couple of moments time. Under the bridge now into the hairpin, into turn number 10, the kink right before it. Now getting on the brakes, dropping the anchors into the turn number 11 hairpin. This is going to be a real good overtaking opportunity for these drivers, but now we're back up on the gas, still turning. Not a lot of straightaways to talk about on this racetrack, but in these Spec Racer Fords, you're spending a decent chunk of this lap flat out nevertheless. Bet to head our way off into turn number 13, the spoon curve, another iconic corner around this racetrack. Don't want to run wide, though, heading off into the AstroTurf. That's not the ideal line at all. Don't want to risk that too hard, otherwise you're going to end up with a slowdown down this back straightaway, which is going to be a detriment. You can see that very small pit lane there on the right hand side. That I think may rear its ugly head come time for the crash 'em up wreck fest that usually follows these Weekend Warriors races for these drivers to blow off some steam. Here's the real steamy section. That is 130R, turn number 14. Technically speaking, the corner name doesn't even apply to the way that corner is anymore, but still a wonderful corner and historic as well. That's the final corner, the final chicane, the Casio triangle, and this is the final turn, turn number 17, to spit your way back onto the start-finish straightaway, and that's a lap of Suzuka.
An iconic track, iconic sectors of this track. They're doing tire management pretty much the entire lap. We see Jason Green now getting knocked off the pole position by Trenton Kramer. Jason Green has been on top of the leaderboard here in qualifying for most of this session. He was able to get out and get a nice slipstream off of Maurizio Naselli. Now Maurizio down in 5th place. We do have, it looks like, 5 drivers have broken through the 2-minute 18 barrier into the 2:17s. Trenton Kramer now currently the quickest of those and your provisional pole sitter. They do have a couple minutes left, about 5 minutes left to set lap times, with a lap time being about 2 minutes and 18 seconds. They've really got 2, possibly a 3rd lap, depending on where they're at on track right now.
And that's another thing to raise about Suzuka. It's one of the longest tracks that we've visited thus far in this Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors season. 3.6 miles long with 17 corners around it. Makes it one of the longer tracks that we will visit all throughout this season. Looking through some of the tracks that we've had thus far this season, it has been a brilliant season schedule. We've got 3 more races following this. VIR, going to be a good one. Cadwell Park, that's going to be an old school race if ever you see one around that track that feels like a I was going to say something. I was going to say it feels like a parking lot driving around there. That track is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but it is really narrow in certain sections of it as well. Then we're going to bring this season to a close at Road Atlanta, which is going to be a rather fun broadcast from my personal perspective. Full transparency, folks, the first time I was ever on a Weekend Warriors broadcast back in March of 2023, it was for a Spec Racer Ford race at Road Atlanta with our old SMB colleague, Mr. Tim Cox, on the call for that one. He mispronounced my name on the broadcast open, but hey, at least he didn't call me Munoz. Looking at these drivers on track right now, though, following Jörg Monty in the 925 car. Randall, you've been calling Monty the janitor, and despite the fact his dominance hasn't been so strong here in the Spec Racer Fords, he has still been very quick all throughout this season with a slew of race wins, including an overall win at Donington 1 week ago.
Yeah, he comes into this race with a lot of momentum. 2 overall victories last Sunday here for the Weekend Warriors. He just got another Masters victory a little bit ago in the Formula Fords, finishing 6th place overall, though he was fighting for 4th the entire time. And now he's sitting on the provisional pole for the Masters division. We look to a few cars ahead. We see Michael Odell's currently on the Spec 2 pole, and there's a lot of Spec 2 drivers up there in the top of the leaderboard. Matt Thompson is in 12th. He's in 3rd place in Spec 2. At one point, he was as high as 3rd place on the overall timing tower. So slipstream playing a huge effect here in qualifying. Some drivers able to punch way above their weight because they've managed the traffic just right and got a good lap when it counted early, and have been able to sit kind of on their laurels, while other drivers are playing catch up and trying to get one in here at the end of this lap. Like Joshua Wilkie, who's sitting there behind Jörg Manny right now, trying to use that slipstream to improve his time. Jörg's a good driver to follow around here. He's pretty quick, 10th overall right now. So Josh in a good position to improve his time, though it seems he might be being held up in this section of the track a little bit by Jörg, but I bet that gap stretches out just a little bit once they get through Spoon.
Considering the pace that Jörg Mani has shown all throughout the season, that may be the first time that we've said that Jörg Mani has been holding anybody up. As we take a look at a replay to see some sort of shenanigans that befell Trent Kramer a couple of moments ago. Heading his way off into the Degner curves through turn number 8 into turn number 9 right now. There's a real tough section of race course, and there you can see a big crash for a driver right in front of him. That, I believe, may have been Michael Odell, who went off the track coming out of turn number 9 under the bridge. That turn number 9, that entire Degner section in the middle part of this racetrack. I don't know about you, Randall, but I feel like I have never gotten that point of this racetrack down right in my entire time driving around this circuit.
We're going to see Michael Odell getting it wrong here. He's all the way out in the gravel, then tags the wall and ends up spinning right there in front of Trenton Kramer. And we also saw a replay of Trenton Kramer getting it a little bit wrong and running too far wide of the track limits, which will invalidate his lap. And you're absolutely right. It's a very tricky section of track. And if you get the first corner wrong out of the Degners, you're going to almost invariably get the second one wrong and be spit out wide, like we saw both of those drivers do right there. So it's very paramount that maybe you have to sacrifice some entry speed to get both those corners right. Otherwise, you'll find yourself running wide, either getting an off track or getting spit out all the way into the gravel like we saw with Odell.
And that was a real easy mistake to make as well. I've been there, I've done that, albeit there's a very good reason why I'm behind a microphone instead behind the wheel. Maurizio Nazelli currently on the provisional pole at 2:17.589. And while we still can, I want to mention the gap between Paul Jackson and Andrew Love, which is literally nothing. Those two drivers tied at the moment in this qualifying session, only in the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. And that's not a one-off either. I don't think there's anyone else that's tied at the moment in this qualifying session, but looking through, I'm pretty sure the gap between Domenico Massi, who I believe is a newcomer here to the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors in the 220 car, and Paolo Brema, that's 0.07 of a second. So these drivers vacuum sealed together like a bunch of chicken breasts you can buy at a grocery store.
In real life racing, how they determine who wins a tie is typically who sets the time first gets the position. In iRacing, though, I can tell you that on the back end, while we're seeing thousandths of a second, iRacing actually measures down to nanoseconds. So there's another digit that's not displayed on any of the live timing that they use to break ties. So you actually get 4 places with iRacing's data. If you were to look into the data API, you would see 4 decimal places and not just 3. And that's typically what they use to break ties here. We see Felix Somoza running really wide there on the entry to Spoon. I'm not sure if that will invalidate his lap or not, but he's currently sitting pretty in second place. Maurizio Naselli able to set that pole time here in the closing stages with a 2:17.589. He is 1.5 tenths faster than Felix Somoza. I'm not sure. It didn't look like he had a lot of slipstream, but maybe he did have some slipstream that he passed on the front straightaway. He does have time to set one more lap. Felix, this will be it for him. This time will have to stand. Either if he improves now, it'll be an improvement. If he doesn't, he's stuck where he's at. We'll see how this shakes out as he's going to dip into pit lane. So likely he did invalidate that lap time and getting a good look at that pit entry, which is always a good call. It's a tricky pit entry here.
Yeah, it's incredibly narrow for these drivers here. Met on either side with Armco barriers, which are not forgiving at all. So we see Josh Wilkie in one of his best performances in a qualifying session thus far this season, finds himself in 8th. I just want to give a quick correction that was provided by Flavio Andallo in the YouTube chat. Domenico Massi raced last week. In my defense, I was on the iRacing Make-A-Wish Drive for Wishes charity broadcast, so I have no idea what the hell happened last week. So Domenico Massi not making his series debut. So thank you everybody in the YouTube chat for correcting me, as your forgetful host doesn't even know what 2 + 2 is.
Yes, he was here last week, and he did have a good showing. So hopefully he'll be continuing to make a good stamp on the series with his name, as we're on board now with Adam Bradshaw, who's trying to complete one last lap. We are now well past the end of qualifying. Given that it's 2 minutes past qualifying, I suspect that he's not going to have this lap count. He doesn't only have, whoa, big slide. And that's one of the places you have to look out for it there. And that hairpin, it's very tight, very easy to get back to the throttle too early and catch the rear end out just like that, as we're going to see him reset the car. I believe he was the last car on track. No, I see one more, Aleix Pleva, and hopefully we'll get that grid order here very soon. So we wait for Aleix Pleva, who's only qualified 10th. That's a kind of a shock to me. Aleix is normally one of those drivers right at the front end of qualifying, so he's going to have a lot of ground to make up if he wants to challenge for the win today.
So a lot of these drivers, I wouldn't say massively on the back foot, but even if you tripped up a little bit in that qualifying session, we saw thousandths, hundredths. Very rarely did we see more than a tenth of a second separate two single race car drivers in that qualifying session. So you go a little bit wide through one of the corners around this track, and you are going to be in for a world of hurt, and probably starting a couple rows back than you probably had in mind. Still waiting for this qualifying session to officially come to a close. No drivers are out there on the racetrack at the present moment, but iRacing still running out the clock. Maurizio Nazelli will be starting from the pole. Maurizio Nazelli, very fast driver in this series. Some of the first Spec Racer Forward Weekend Warriors broadcasts I did involving Maurizio Nazelli saw him start at the back and just cut his way through the field like a hot knife through butter. He's actually been participating in qualifying sessions, though, as of late, and certainly proved himself to be a really fast driver in that qualifying session early on as he grabs the pole, saying a 2-minute 17.589 in the process. Felix Samoa's going to join him on the front row. Felix already has 2 wins thus far this season. Going to try and make it a third. Speaking of third, starting in third is going to be Trent Kramer alongside Jason Green, who we rode on board with. He will be starting in fourth. Michael Odell will be starting from the Spec 2 pole, P5 overall, next to Joao Tabino, the Brazilian, in 6th. Ben Rycroft will start in 7th. Joshua Wilkie will start in P8. We have Tortolo in 9th. Aleix Pleva going to round out your top 10.
The janitor, Jörg Manny, starting on the Masters Division pole in 11th place overall. Next to him, his chief rival, Antonio Rees, in 12th position. In 13th position, we have Matt Thompson driving for the Frito Sport team in 13th. 14th is Joachim Osbeck. 15th, Adam Bradshaw. And starting next to him in 16th place is Daniel Wood. David Jarvis is going to start 17th. Scott Russell in 18th. Kane Lasky all the way back in 19th, starting next to Dan Witzak, who rounds out your top 20.
And looking through the drivers that we have starting outside the top 20, it starts with Brad Cathcart in 21st, the Aussie behind the wheel of the 905 car. Paolo Brema, the Italian, will start alongside in P22. Domenico Massi, the New Yorker. Actually, considering I am from Philadelphia, I feel like this won't be too offensive for me to say. The New Yorker behind the wheel of the 220 car will start this race in 23rd. Next to Aid Allen, the Welshman, in the 666 car. Starting this race behind him in P25 is going to be Kurt Nunez. Tom Gradwell will start alongside in 26th. Paul Jackson in 27th. Andrew Love in P28. Joseph Tarantino, Jeff Jacobson will round out your top 30, and the final few rows are going to be composed of the Swede in the form of Andre Favini starting in 31st. The Central Eastern European in the form of Nainoud Ulip. I deeply, deeply apologize if I absolutely wrecked that pronunciation, but the driver of the number 3 car will be starting in 32nd. Alan McCain in 33rd. Russell Telker will be starting this race in 34th. Rounding out your starting grid, 34 cars, not the biggest we've seen thus far this season, but still a stout field nevertheless.
Once I get to the S's, 34 is going to feel like it's about 70, and it's going to become an absolute traffic jam. I do want to shout out Aid Allen. This is his first race in a motion rig, so he's got his motion sim set up. I'm not sure if he's also racing in VR, and if he is, hopefully he's able to navigate these first couple laps, and that car doesn't turn into a vomit comet with the motion and the VR. We see the cars making their way down the straightaway towards 130R. Not many. They're doing an abbreviated start lap here. We're going to take a quick look at points before they get underway.
Yeah, it's Felix Samoa's leading it in the Spec 1 category. He has about a 50-point gap over Jason Green in P2. Moving over to the Spec 2 category, you can see Dan Witzak as your current points leader there over Ben Rycroft. That's a slightly bigger gap. In the Masters category, meanwhile, it hasn't been the story of dominance as it has been in the other categories for Jörg Manny, but he has still been kicking butt and taking names thus far this season. 565 points on the board as it stands currently. So that's how it looks in the points. Here's how it looks on track. It's foggy. The relative humidity is incredibly high. These drivers are driving around soup Suzuka. That was terrible. I apologize. Ready to get things up and rolling for the 9th race of this season, waiting for Maurizio Nazelli to grab that green flag and see if he can hold off the challenge from Felix Samoas alongside as these drivers pick their way through the mist. We can't even see them, but the green flag is out, and the drivers are on their way, if they could even see it. Heading down that start-finish straightaway into turn number 1, the field fanning at 3, 4, 5, 6 wide, a little bit farther in the back. Look at these racers, and look at Samoa sweeping around the outside, heading off into turn number 1 and 2. He's going to take the lead over Maurizio Nazelli in P2. Look at that trend. Kramer and Jason Green, the two Americans, going side by side, and Josh Wilkie getting off to a flyer as well.
I was kind of shocked that they made it through turn 1 as wide as they were. As we see the 23 car running wide there on the entry to the S's, they really need to shake this out and get in single file as much as they can here at the top of the field or all the way through the field. We see Aleix Pleva already challenging. He's up a few spots just off of that start. But Felix Samoas looked like he was shot out of a cannon on that start. We saw him pinch over on Maurizio Nazelli at the start, kind of put the field in a little bit of chaos, but he was completely allowed to do that. And once that green flag was in the air, he took off like a bat out of hell and is now leading this race.
Felix Samoa is trying to slither away from the field. They're out of the snaking S's section, but they're into the hairpin at turn number 11. Let's see how these drivers are going to tackle this corner for the first time under green. It's such a encouraging overtaking opportunity, but it can end in tears, and it's ended in tears for Wilkie. He runs into the gravel trap, hang through turn number 11. I apologize, Josh, for the commentator's shanks. That's going to drop him down the running order a little bit. Outside that, though, I think most of the field negotiated that turn 11 hairpin surprisingly clean at the start of this race. But look at Felix Samoas still leading this race. He only has 2 wins, but he has been militarily fast all throughout the season as Trent Kramer sideways, slideways coming out of the spoon section. He keeps it going in a straight line, but those tires have been reduced down to the matter of atoms as a result of that lockup.
It's very easy to lose the car there. It's a very tricky corner. The camber's changing. The elevation is changing as you make your way through it. It feels like the track tightens on exit there, and it doesn't really. It stays the same width, but just the way the geography of the corner makes it feel like it's extremely tight on exit. Your car wants to really understeer out towards that exit where we saw him get a bit wide. Felix Samoa is going to lead the initial lap of this race. He's pulled 0.6 of a second over Maurizio Nazelli. We'll see that gap come down a little bit here as it's already starting to fall because of the slipstream. And I hear we had an issue with Kane Lasky.
And let's look at Lasky in that 09 car, and Owell's contact with himself in the 555. That was heading into turn number 7, right towards the end of the S as he rejoins the race, albeit losing a boatload time. And also spinning again as he rejoined the racetrack. He's already left the session, so I think he decided to call it a day. Spun around yet again. And yep, that was the end of Kane Lasky's attempt at this race. That was himself and Pella Brema who came to blows to the Italian in the 555 car. Not making a friend in Kane Lasky here today.
He will not be. We've seen Kane have some issues with traffic a few times throughout the season, and it comes to bite him here today. We see Trenton Kramer now all over the rear bumper of Michael Odell. He's got a couple spots to make up after losing out here early, but we saw him running really wide. He's really pushing this car, so he's in a good position here. He's going to bump Michael going down the straightaway on the run up to the hairpin. Is he going to make a move? No, he's going to back off and kind of follow Michael through this corner. You see them running a very, very tight apex. The alternate line through there is to run the middle of the corner. You can carry a bit more momentum and a bit more speed, even if it's a bit of a longer run, and carry that speed all the way up to Spoon Curve. So sometimes you'll see drivers making that midline or that karting line through that hairpin.
And it seems like these drivers always experimental in terms of the lines that they're going to be running around here. And I gotta wonder if this race was affected heavily by rain, which, considering the relative humidity according to iRacing's weather radar, is 100%. Man, seeing a rain-affected Spec Racer Ford race, that would be ridiculous. Hey, iRacing, you may want to may want to work on that. So that's actually, I will not give directives to iRacing. I would quite like to be able to keep my job over there as we take a look at these drivers up towards the front of the field, breaking away from the rest of the pack. You can see Joao Tabina leading that group of drivers not running in the podium spots. Felix Samoa is still leading this race over Nazelli and Jason Green. I think Antonio Reese has had some sort of off-track excursion as we take a look to see what happened to Josh. He had that off-track moment hang through turn number 11 a couple of moments before this. And there he goes side by side into Spoon. And oh, he makes contact with Bradshaw.
Not a good day for him. He will be happy to see Suzuka in his rear view mirror as he moves on through the season. But right now we rejoin the live pictures. Felix Samos still leading the way over Naselli and Jason Green. Jason Green was the leader in the qualifying session for at least the first 10 to 12 minutes. So Green has speed, and we'll see if any of them are able to keep up or do some fuel saving. We see Josh Wilkie having an incident there, and that's what costs him a lot of time. It looks like he's got a little bit of damage on that car. It'll definitely affect the straight line speed, but hopefully not too bad. He does have a quick repair available to him when he comes in for his pit stop, so he may decide to opt for an early pit strategy. Tortello is involved here, and is that Antonio Reese behind. He just misses his braking mark there on the inside, drives it really deep, then drives it through the gravel, does the old Ayrton Senna rejoin, and I bet there will be a lot less drama about that one than there was when Senna did it.
And thankfully for Tullo, he avoided any sort of contact with his competitors or the wall. All the body panels on that Spec Racer Ford car of his still good to go, so the Cookie Monster not leaving any crumbs behind. I will say one thing about Josh Wilkie having a really iffy start to this race. I've been warning Josh for a while that that fermented maple syrup in his fridge is probably not safe to consume. Oh boy, that's unfortunate for the driver of the 23 car, and that right there is about as much as I will say about that, at the risk of me losing my job here at Slow Motion Broadcasting. As we take a look at some side-by-side racing involving Trent Kramer and Elise Pleva heading down into 130R. It looks like Trent Kramer going to get that move done in the 120 car.
Normally 130R, not a really good passing opportunity when you have just one class of car. We haven't seen many people try to go through there too wide quite yet, but it can be a passing opportunity if you're bold, and it requires quite a bit of boldness, but it can pay off for you in the long run, especially if the other driver hasn't practiced going through that too wide. We see this gap forming. This is just like the Formula Ford race we saw a little bit ago. We have the top three breaking away, and then another three cars in a group behind them, and then the rest of the pack back there's quite a ways. So seeing some separation here, seeing some groups forming right now. This is your podium: Felix Samos, Maurizio Naselli, Jason Green, then Trenton Kramer, Elish Pleva, and Michael Odell. Odell leading that Spec 2 division in that second group of three.
And as we see these shots of the field hang their way down that start-finish straightaway, you just look at the fog and see the lack of any sort of vision or visibility that these drivers are having. So I've decided to join these drivers for this broadcast. I've taken my glasses off, which is not a good thing considering my left eye has about 20/50 vision, and I have a pretty severe case of lazy eye as well. So as we see blobs moving across the screen, it's side-by-side racing with Antonio Reese and Tortolo heading down into the Degner curves. Looks like Antonio Reese going to get that move done to slip his way up into P16. And that's another thing when it comes to the Weekend Warriors, something you don't really see in other series, the amount of interclass mingling that you see. You've got Spec 1 drivers battling with Spec 2 drivers who are battling with Masters racers, and they're all kind of involved in their own little bubble. And one thing to raise as well with this season of the Weekend Warriors, it's been one of the most competitive in my memory of my entire time covering the Weekend Warriors. In all three of the series, in the Formula Vs, the Formula 4s, and the Spec Racer 4s, we've had a non-Spec 1 driver win at least one race all throughout these seasons, as we saw some sideways, slideways action involving Joseph Tarantino, and I believe that was I think that may have been Burkett. It was one of the Welsh cars around this track. I believe we do have two of them, so it's a little bit hard to differentiate the two of them, doubly so considering my glasses are still off of my face. But either way, some synchronized spinning heading off through turn number 1 and 2, which Randall, such a tricky section to try and get right in these cars.
It's tricky enough when you're doing it by yourself, when you're getting pressure from the car behind, or if there's any difference in the way that the drivers attack it, it can quickly become a nightmare. As we saw there, we had 2 drivers spinning out. I think one of those was Aid Allen in that motion rig. So he's definitely going to be putting that motion rig through its paces by doing a big slide like that and a bit of contact. We look back and see Jörg Manny back in 13th place, back in 12th place. Sorry, he's making the move to get 12th place from Dan Witzak, making his way up through the field right now. Not his best race so far this season. He's down 1 spot from where he qualified, though he still does lead that Masters division. He's got a bit of a gap ahead of him to Joachim Osbach, but I bet he has the pace to close that down pretty quickly.
And let's see if he will be able to get the job done. This race is still far from over. We've got 30 minutes of racing action left to go here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race. We also have to worry about those pit stops as well. We saw in the Formula Ford race earlier on, Randall, bearing in mind that was at a completely different racetrack with completely different race cars and some completely different drivers as well. That the pit stop dilemma in these Sunday Weekend Warriors races are so important, and the Spec Racer Fords around a track like this going to be no different as Felix Samoas gets tripped up heading through turn number 11, gets sideways. That's going to allow Maurizio Nazelli to get the move done to slip into the race lead.
Absolutely one of the trickiest corners on this track, and it bit Felix Samoas this time around. He did lose the spot and he lost a bit of time, but he'll be able to close that gap up pretty easily. When it comes to pit strategy, like you said, you want to take the least amount of fuel possible. So some of these drivers, especially your Jason Greens and your Trenton Kramers that are sitting at the back of their respective groups, are in good positions to save a lot of fuel. However, the undercut is very powerful here at Suzuka, because when you come out of this pit lane, you're going much slower than cars on track. So if you are able to get into the pits before everybody else, you'll be carrying a lot of momentum down that straightaway whenever the other drivers come out of the pits, and you'll likely be able to retain or take the position by being the one that's coming on track much quicker.
Yeah, those pit stops and the way these drivers tackle that pit strategy dilemma going to be the most important thing come time for the end of this race. But still very early doors at the present moment, 11 and a half minutes on the clock as we follow your Spec 2 leader, Michael Odell. Odell made his appearance on the Racing Line podcast the other day, which you can catch on the Ray Esports YouTube channel every single Tuesday. However, that appearance certainly not giving him a lot of speed heading down that start-finish straightaway, as a game of leapfrog very much so going on. Odell started that straightaway in 4th, at one point was running in 6th, then made his way back up into 5th as Trent Kramer jumped in front of himself and Alace Pleva. That was typical Spec Racer Ford action.
Absolutely, the 2-for-1 special on for Trenton Kramer. Alace Pleva was able to attack and gain a position, and then Trenton, coming with a head of steam, managed to make him lose that spot. So Trenton Kramer, very opportunistic move, going to lead this group now. He thinks maybe he can track down the top 3. We'll see if he's able to do that or not. Jörg Manny has caught up to Daniel Wood and Joachim Osbach, so he's made that gap close pretty quickly. Now he's got to work his way around 2 cars in a track that's really hard, kind of hard to pass on, so he doesn't have a lot of opportunities for passing. He's going to be kind of stuck here, either doing some fuel management, which is not the janitor's forte, or have to get really aggressive and really bold in some places you normally wouldn't see overtakes.
And let's see how Jörg Manny is going to do this. There we go, nearly going for a move on Daniel Wood, heading off into turn number 11. I don't believe he was able to get that move done, although he certainly did get close. Jörg Manny, I think there's many good reasons why we've called him the janitor thus far this season. There's many ways in which that's a fitting name. Not only has he been cleaning up, he has been the bleep thus far this season. He's been oh so fast in that 925 car, whether it be in the Formula V's, the Formula Fords, or the Spec Racer Fords. He has been dominant throughout this season, and even here in the Spec Racer Fords, where, as I've mentioned on some of my other Weekend Warriors broadcasts here, he hasn't been super quick, but look at that. They nearly crashed heading down that start-finish straightaway. I think they tried to do a little bit of bump drafting, which nearly ended about as badly as it possibly could have.
Jörg Manny gets caught up on that exit curb. It's real easy once your tires go over that big edge on the outside of that curb to get stuck there, and luckily he doesn't spin the car because of that. You see a lot of cars cannot handle that edge. Once they go over, they go around. he's able to wrangle that Spec Racer forward and keep it pointing in the right direction, but it does cause him a little to lose a little bit of time. So we're going to jump back to the race for the lead. Looks like Felix Samoa's pretty happy to sit here in second place for now once he's made that mistake and get that slipstream off Maurizio Naselli, do some fuel management. Jason Green in a prime position to be challenging for the win here at the end of the race.
And let's see how these drivers are going to go about. Some pit stops are already starting, involving Ada Allen and Paul Jackson a little bit farther in the back. Let's see how those two Spec 2 racers shake out with that early call to pit. They're going to be last and second last of the drivers out there on the racetrack right now. 2 retirements already, that being, unfortunately, Mr. SMB himself, Josh Wilkie, and Kane Lasky. So that's going to take those 2 out of contention. And I will get ahead and write my apology that I'll probably have to tell him before the XSLR broadcast that you'll be able to see later on this evening here on SMB as Andre Favini goes wildly off the track, heading off through turn number 1. Looked like he was going about 35 miles an hour too quick, heading off through that section. Yet again, Randall, some drivers getting called out by turn number 1 and 2. Usually in like high downforce race cars, that section is tricky enough, but in a Spec Racer Ford where you really want to carry the momentum, it makes the challenges of that section amplified.
And despite the aerodynamic look of these cars, they don't really have a lot of downforce. So you only have the downforce that you brought with you in your beer belly. Not Maurizio Naselli. Andrea Favini had just gotten around 2 cars, likely was carrying some excess speed into that first corner complex because of the slipstream, and just didn't back it down enough going through there. And you saw him run wide, give up a couple spots, and he's going to have to get back going again in the right direction and try to get those spots back, because he's doing what he does every week, the back to front challenge.
I gotta say, some of the drivers in these Spec Racer Ford races, as we see side-by-side racing with Jörg Money and Joachim Osbeck heading down into 130R, that's now turning into a fight with Osbeck and Wood. Here we go, heading off into the Casio Triangle. Osbeck going to remain in P10 as it stands at the present moment. Worst time for me to get hiccups on the air. Oh boy, oh man, my don't kill me now, indigestion, as we see these drivers begin to march along. Oh wow, these hiccups, they hate me today, holy cow.
Jörg Manning able to get that move done on the drivers ahead of him finally. It took him a little bit longer than he would have liked, and that means that gap ahead of him now is 2.6 seconds, so he's got a lot of ground to make up to catch the next cars in the form of David Jarvis and Ben Rycroft. But it's not impossible for him. If you watch the timing tower, you're seeing those tenths bleed away quickly now, as we're going to see here Paulo Bram and Russell Telker involved here in 130R, and Russell Telker gets out there, and you see right there exactly what I said. He got those outside tires right over the edge of that curbing, and it just pulls the car off. And if you try to fight it too much, that's exactly what's going to happen. The rear end is going to step out, heavy contact with the barrier on the other side of the track, and that's going to end his race today.
Yeah, that sawtooth curb on the outside of 130R. We were running on board with Jörg Mani a couple of laps ago, Randall, and we saw that it was, I'm not sure the best way I feel like some like skateboard terminology. It's like when you're grinding on a rail on a skateboard. You can tell I never skated, but that's basically the way that I see it. Seeing these cars hit that curb, they just get locked onto it, and they can't really move unless they either jerk the wheel, in which case you're probably going to go the way of Russ Telker and end up hitting either the inside wall or the outside wall, or you just kind of have to ride it out and hope to God you don't end up crashing. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation when that sort of stuff happens, and sadly, Russ Telker going to be the latest to get called out by that. But here we go, side-by-side racing with Felix Samoas and Maurizio Naselli. Samoa is going to get that move done to jump his way up to the race lead yet again. I mentioned this earlier on, and I'll mention it yet again as we see, that curb yet again catching out another driver, that being Samoa. As you can see, he got off it after a while, but he was certainly caught on it in these Spec Racer Ford cars. But the point I was going to raise was the fact that Samoa's has been very quick thus far this season. The fact he only has 2 wins really speaks volumes about how prevalent those falling anvils are in these Weekend Warriors races.
Don't look now though, in that 4th position, Trenton Kramer, now that he's gotten to the front of that pack, he has been able to close that gap up to Jason Green. That is down to 1.3 seconds now. So Trenton Kramer coming with a head of steam. Looks like he runs a bit wide there in turn 1, so now he's going to give some of that time back. hopefully not going to have too much pressure from behind. But if you're in that second group, I'm letting Trenton Kramer lead the way and pull me up to these leaders. We could have a 6-way battle for this lead.
If we have a 6-way battle, I'm not sure how my body is going to respond. It's probably going to bring the hiccups back to derail my chances of calling what will probably be an amazing finish if that is the case. But still, Trent Kramer, Michael Odell, and Elias Pleva working together, and we may find ourselves in the I wouldn't say it's incredibly likely, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities either. We could go back-to-back and have non-Spec 1 drivers take 2 straight overall wins. Michael Odell will certainly have to fight like hell in that 297 car to get that job done to win this race, but he finds himself in 5th, and the gap between the front 3 and the 3 behind is closing. So Michael Odell may find himself in a shot to do that.
We're at the halfway point of the race as far as time is concerned. We are also halfway as far as distance is concerned. We're looking at probably 17 laps. They're currently serving lap 9. There is a possibility that they go for an 18th lap, but most likely 17 laps here. We'll see. We'll get a better read on that after the pit stops. Speaking of pit stops, Kurt Nunez, Aid Allen, and Paul Jackson have all come in, and their stop times have ranged from 14 to 17 seconds. So that's going to be our benchmark for pit times as we see Tortillo get a little bit wide there on the exit of Spoon, and that's going to allow Antonio Reese to get through on the straightaway run up to 130R. We see Antonio start to cover this off as they get down the straightaway to open up that entry to 130R. So one little mistake caused him a position here, and now Tor is going to have to hang on to Antonio Reese or try to fight back to get that position back.
I'm sorry, every single time I see that Cookie Monster car, I'm not sure what awakes in my brain, but it's certainly a mixture of many emotions that I see with that Cookie Monster car running around the track. Certainly scared Daniel Wood off the circuit, heading down into the braking zone into turn number 11. That hairpin, really tricky, that braking zone, because he got the kink of turn number 10 right before then, and in the Spec Racer Ford trying to scrub off speed. That is terrifying. Speaking of terrifying, Jörg Mani trying to get a move done on Joachim Osbeck and got it done successfully as more drivers making that call to pit, mainly in the case of Daniel Wood, Tom Gradwell, and Andre Favini.
Andre Favini, we saw him in the incident in turn 1 where he ran wide. He's coming in early, probably to try to do some traffic management. We also see Daniel Wood in the pit lane after that lockup into turn 11. Trenton Kramer here sitting pretty in 6th place. He got passed by Elias Pleva, and they've let a little bit of a gap form to Trenton Kramer. So Trenton trying to run away from those two. They need to kind of work together to catch it back up to make sure they don't lose the slipstream there. But right now, I'm sorry, that's Trenton Kramer in 3rd place in that group. Michael Odell is now in 4th place, trying to lead the way to close the gap to the leaders.
Yeah, not sure what's going down involving Trent Kramer in that number 20 car, and I will refrain from mentioning him any further on the account of the fact I pulled off a really bad commentator's jinx on him a few moments, I say a few moments ago, it was like an hour and a half ago at this point during the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors broadcast, and to the point where he was talking about how the Alligator, which is, if anyone's seen the paint scheme that Trent Kramer runs in the Formula Fords, he does run Alligator scheme, and end up with that falling anvil crashing down onto the Alligator, which, saying that now, I feel like we're going to see some sort of like Florida Man headline of that actually happening somewhere in Florida. Probably Tallahassee. That feels like a place where it would be most likely to happen. Oh yeah, we're talking about a race right now. Here we go. 3 drivers running all in a line with Odell making his way up to 4th.
Odell in a really good position here, but he's going to be feeling the pressure here very quickly. And they need to work together and sort this out if they're going to have any chance to close up to the podium positions, as Jörg Manny is now all over the back of Joachim Osbeck. Osbeck was behind Manny earlier, so I'm not sure exactly what transpired here that's gotten Osbeck back in front of Jörg Manny. And Dan Witzak is right there on the rear bumper of Manny. He's been following him through the crowd as they're going to see Osbeck, Manny, and Witzak all coming to the pit lane. And look at that move from the janitor. Absolutely sending it up the inside, getting that braking point on the pit entry just right, and gonna get that position back from Osbeck in the pit entry. I didn't think it was wide enough for 2 cars.
I didn't think it was either. Oh boy, we have to take a look at a replay to see that move that Jörg Mani pulled off on pit entry. That looked slick, and not like how I'm usually slick, like 80 grit sandpaper. That looked like a very well executed move heading into the pits. We mentioned earlier on how it feels like an alleyway coming into pit lane around this racetrack, because you've got the Armco barriers on either side, which loom menacingly for these drivers. So there you can see the aftermath of Monty getting that move done, with all those drivers trundling their way into the pits. Jason Green at the front of it. I don't think we mentioned the fact that Jason Green broke away from the drivers that he was involved in that 3-car battle with, so he came into the pits. Jörg Monty, though, with that licking the stamp and sending a maneuver on pit entry. I don't think I've seen that before. Kind of reminiscent of Sebastian Vettel at the Chinese Grand Prix back in 2016 when he overtook 2 cars on pit entry there.
It looked like it was mostly reactive, so probably Joaquim hit the brakes a bit sooner than Jörg was expecting and had to make evasive action, and it just turned out to be brilliant for him. So Joaquim Osbach ended up giving up 2 or 3 spots on pit entry there, so maybe he also got spooked. We see Aleix Pleva now sitting currently in 3rd overall. You're right, Jason Green did pit out of that lead group. He was stopped for 13.4 seconds, so he was been able to save a lot of fuel. What he's hoping for now is that the 2 leaders pit this time by, because he doesn't want to be out there without the slipstream for very long, or they're going to be able to pull away from him. So right now, Jason Green needs to be setting quality pace laps, and he's really hoping these leaders will pit in reaction this time by.
A lot of drivers putting a lot of money on these reactive pit stops, which are certainly a rather common occurrence in these races. I just saw a significant amount of damage on Adam Bradshaw's race car as Maurizio Nazelli making that call to come into the pits in the number 44 car. So let's see how the German does in this run through the pits. We see Jason Green, you were following him a couple of moments ago. He's running down in 16th as it stands at the present moment. Felix Samoa is staying out for yet another lap. Let's see if he is going to make the call to come into the pits as a reactive maneuver, but I'm curious how things are going to work out for Jason Green. I think he had a rather clean out lap with not a lot of traffic around him, so let's see how things are going to shake out for him. There's Nazelli out and away. You can see Jason Green, that very bright looking paint scheme sticking out, I wouldn't say like a sore thumb, that's a little bit mean, but certainly appearing through the mist, heading down that start finish straightaway. Not close enough to Nazelli. In fact, I believe that gap has ballooned between Nazelli and Jason Green. So as much as Green may have had a good run through after that pit stop, I think he may have gotten the short end of the stick.
So Jason's pit stop time was 4/10 faster than Maurizio's. So Maurizio not having a slow pit stop, but it was 4/10 slower. But I think the difference is Maurizio is known for attacking pit entries, and that's where he gains a lot of his time in the pit strategy. I suspect that Nazelli was able to really attack that pit entry, carry a lot of speed into it, and that's what made the big difference on track. Jason Green not out of contact, though. He does have a chance to close that gap up, but it's going to be really interesting to see how it all shakes out once Simoes comes in. Also, once Kramer and Pleva come in, where are they going to shake out? Because they're not too far off being in contact with these top 3.
And let's see how things are going to shake out for these drivers. It may seem like a lot of this race has gone, and that's because it has 27.5 minutes now on the clock. Well, we still got 12.5 left to go, and a lot can happen in 12.5 minutes. And one of the things that is certainly going to happen in the not too far off future is going to be this man, Felix Samoes, making that call to pit. And I'm curious, one thing to mention in terms of these drivers coming down pit lane is I wonder how that's going to shift the battle that is going on right behind them as well, involving Trent Kramer, Aleix Pleva, and Michael O'Dell. But here we go, Samoes making that call to pit. He's being joined down in pit lane by Trent Kramer and Aleix Pleva. I'm waiting to see if anyone else makes that call to pit, whether Antonio Reese or Tortolo are going to join them. Yes, they will. That was beautifully timed from me. There they go into the pit box right now. Brad Cathcart, let's see if he's going to join them, the Aussie and the 905 car. Yes, he will. Lots of drivers deciding that now is the prime spot to pit. The top 8 drivers all making that call to come into pit lane. Felix Samoes on pit exit. Maurizio Nazelli on that start-finish straightaway. Let's see how it's going to work out as I drop some piece of metal onto my desk. I think Nazelli got away with one there. Yes, he did. Felix Samoes now in P2, and Trent Kramer just got involved in the battle with himself and Jason Green.
Absolutely. Trent Kramer has been able to close a bit of that gap between Jason Green not having the best pit entry possibly and Kramer having a good one. He's currently carrying a black flag for some reason, though, so I suspect Trenton Kramer may have gotten a speeding on exit penalty. We'll see if he comes back in, and that'll be the end of his race. But if not, Yeah, I'm not. That's the only thing I could think of why he would have a black flag right now. It's definitely not a slowdown. It would have been served by now. So it looks like Kramer has picked up a pit road speeding penalty on the exit. So that's going to take him out of this race. So all that hard work gone right out of the window for Trenton Kramer, and a sad finish here for him at Suzuka.
Unfortunate for Kramer getting caught up in the red mist, as I was too. The marbles falling out of my ear was a little bit of the sound effects that you heard as those drivers marched out of the pits, as we see Joseph Tarantino. And I always mention it in the New Jersey Garden State Parkway car. Let's see, heading off into turn number 11. And simple spin, nothing too serious, and gets it back going in the right direction rather quickly. I was going to say if he was stopped for a couple of moments, resembles the traffic on the Garden State Parkway. I think Joseph Tarantino knew that I was going to make that joke and decided to gun it as soon as he spun around.
So this gap from Maurizio Naselli back to Felix Simoes was a little bit bigger. It is starting to close down, and Felix Simoes is getting into slipstream range. So Maurizio Naselli not going to be able to parlay pit strategy into a big gap. Jason Green is right there on the rear bumper of Simoes. So we're about to see this top trio reform. Aleix Pleva quite a ways back. He's going to inherit fourth position once Trenton Kramer comes in to serve that black flag. Ben Rycroft here is in a pretty good position. He gained a lot on the pit strategy here. So he's gained a whole bunch of spots as we see Jörg Manny get back in front of Michael Odell, or not back in front of, get in front of Odell here going into 130R. Odell's really fallen off the pace here after the pit stops. He was up in that second trio. Now he's fallen down the order into 8th overall and under pressure from Antonio Reese.
And there's Trenton Kramer coming into the pits to serve that penalty. That's a kick in the nuts if ever you see one for the driver of the number 20 car. He's going to remain inside the top 10. However, he's going to have the hornet's nest of Monty, Odell, Reese, and Witzak bearing down on him as he exits out. In that time coming through the pits, it's not going to cause his tires to be stone cold. However, they're not going to be as scalding hot as those drivers who have stayed out yet again. So that's going to be a little bit of a thorn in the side for Trenton Kramer over the next couple of laps. I will note track temperature is currently at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, so a bit on the cold end with ambient temperatures around 65. Light fog, according to how iRacing calls it. That is so bit for sure.
I'm looking at the calculations right now. My calculations are saying they're going to be able to do 17.06 laps in the span of 40 minutes after the pit stop. We'll get the leaders by the line one more time to get for sure reading on that, but I'm not sure if they will get an 18th lap at this point or not. I suspect they will not, and I hope that all the drivers took fuel possibly banked on there being an extra lap, or else we might see some drivers struggling at the end of this race. Most notably Dan Witzak, who's up 10 positions from where he started, was stopped in his box for only 12.7 seconds. Now, he's been involved in a lot of traffic this race, so he was able to do a lot of fuel management, so he may be good to go there, but that he is the one that stopped the shortest out of everybody.
And that's one thing to raise when it comes to this track. Probably a little bit easier to do some fuel saving than it would be at a track like Monza, for instance, when you're spending a decent chunk of the race lap flat out. Here at Suzuka, though, spending a lot of time off throttle, so we see a wild off-track excursion for Brad Cathcart heading down into the Dagners, avoids any sort of contact with the barrier, just bringing a little bit of gravel back onto the racetrack. He finds himself at 24th as it stands at the present moment. We'll note that the hard charger at this point in the race, with only about 7 minutes left to go, is Andre Favini in P17. However, Alan McCain currently slotted in 20th. He's not terribly far behind in terms of the positions gained. Favini up 14, McCain up 13. So lots of drivers cutting their way through the field throughout this race.
The driver's now getting served lap 15, so possibly 2 laps to go next time by. We're not going to get a clear indicator from iRacing. We'll have to wait to see when we see that white flag. Trenton Kramer now falling back into the clutches of Jörg Manny, Michael Odell, and Antonio Reese, so he's going to have his hands full here very soon. Jörg Manny on the hunt to get up to 6th place, and not going to have a lot of time to try to close the gap up to Ben Rycroft, but it's not impossible either. Both these drivers are very fast. I wouldn't mind having either of them leading the way. Right now it's Trenton Kramer, but that pressure is being applied heavily by Jörg Manny as they make their way through the S's.
And you can see this train of cars. You've got 5 of them, 6 of them in a small little pack. And let's see a replay of a moment involving Scott Russell. Let's see, in that number 22 car, heading his way off through Casio Triangle right now, hit that curb on the inside. Hopefully this isn't a spin. I think there may have been a spin a little bit farther in the back. Yeah, Matt Thompson in that 433 Frito Sport car. He had a moment heading out of 130R, and I think he had another moment as I think Tom Gradwell nearly just sent himself off into the barrier coming out of the corner. Here's Thompson trying to take the old school line heading through. That's a motorcycle chicane. Oh, boy, and that's Jorg Mani into the wall.
Jorg Mani, the janitor, is getting cleaned up this time. I wasn't sure if there was contact there, but Jorg Mani getting a lot of damage. As Michael Odell behind him as they make their way up to the kink, to the hairpin, and I'm suspecting no contact here involved at all, it looks like, and Jorg just gets a little bit greedy on the throttle, gets on the outside out there where it's slick, and spins the car around, or tries to spin the car around, gets it straightened out, but right into the barrier. That's going to be the end of his race. He's going to be playing damage control from there out, and now Trent and Kramer are going to try to get that position back from Michael Odell. They're going to be too wide. There's bumping, they're banging. Antonio Reese, Michael Odell trying to sort it out before 130R. They do get it sorted out, but there's going to be a couple of bruises there after that run.
Yeah, a couple of bruises and some stained underwear. That is not the sort of point of this racetrack where you want to be and bang indoors. Let's take a look at a replay of this. This was terrifying with Reese and Odell. There you can see Trent Kramer getting that move done on Odell. Odell kind of getting hung out to dry without a draft, and this allowed him, oh, look at that. I wouldn't even say that was malicious between either of those two drivers. I think they're just fighting for the same piece of real estate heading down into 130R. You can tell that was terrifying on the kind of the fact that I sound like a tornado siren right after it happened. But side by side to side contact into turn number 14. If one of those drivers gets pinged off into the barrier, that is a field clearing accident.
Absolutely. Odell was trying to open up the entry to 130R, which, sorry, let's put a pause on that. Felix Simoes has taken the lead from Maurizio Naselli. It's a 2-car fight up here right now. Jason Green has fallen off, but Naselli going to give up this lead to Simoes. And Simoes, your new leader, and we're going to have a knife fight for the last couple laps.
Yeah, and here we go. There's a replay of him getting the move done. Rather textbook stuff hanging down that back straightaway around this racetrack. The game of Spec Racer Ford Leapfrog is very much on between these two. However, it's 2 for now. Keyword being for now. Jason Green is about 2 seconds back, so it's a big hill to climb for the 160 car. Both how hard these drivers have been battling all throughout this race and how we've seen these battles up and down the grid occasionally result in a little bit of argy-bargy banging and roughing each other up. We may end up seeing Jason Green get involved in this battle between now and the checkered flag. Not a whole lot of time left to go. 3 minutes left on the clock. I think, unless I'm very much mistaken here, Randall, they may be taking the white flag this time by. That, or it's going to be close for these drivers taking the white or the checkered. I think it will actually be the white next time by. This will be 2 to go. It's always great in math class as a kid. But either way, with a decent amount of time left to go, I wouldn't rule out Jason Green getting involved in that battle.
And I suspect we might be giving out the Thompson Trophy for fuel management this race, because this race does appear to be going 18 laps. So I'm looking, I don't see the white flag this time. It's very hard to see with the fog. We'll kind of try to pick out by the way they're racing if whether or not this is the white flag. But they are serving lap 16. The drivers now are finishing lap 16 and will be starting at lap 17. The leaders are on lap 17, and we did have enough time for another lap, so I suspect we are seeing the 18th lap out of this race. So it shows what I know about calculations. The pit delta here not as big as it would seem, as Simoes is going to continue to lead the way through the S's. Maurizio not looking super racy right now, but this is not really a spot where you would see a lot of racing anyway.
When Jorg Mani and Brad my apologies, not Jorg Mani and Brad Cathcart, Jorg Mani and Andrew Love both coming into pit lane. So that's going to be late pit stops for the both of those drivers. Whether that's a splash or dash or some sort of penalty or maybe taking up a little bit of repairs on those race cars. Either way, though, a late run through the pits, not the ideal way to tackle this race at all. But at the front of the field, these two are going to give us a heads-up fight right to the line. Jason Green going to have a fantastic view of all that. Elise Pleva, He's going to have a fantastic view of some mist hitting his mirror, and that's about all. Ben Rycroft finds himself in the lead in the Spec 2 category after Odell had a really rough midsection of this race and dropped down like a rock. But back at the front of the field, Felix Samoas and Maurizio Nazelli. Samoas already has 2 wins thus far. Nazelli yet to grab a win thus far in not just the Spec Race Awards, but I believe the entirety of the Weekend Warriors world thus far this season. I can't say it's out of character from him. He has grabbed some wins in the past. However, he's been in the catbird seat to grab some wins and has certainly shown some pace. Second tries to charm there. Nazelli, though, if anyone's going to give Samoas a challenge, it's going to be Nazelli.
I was very nervous as they came upon the stricken car of Adam Bradshaw moving very slowly down the straightaway. They were able to navigate around him, so they will be taking the white flag this time. Andrew Love did take fuel. Jörg Manny drove through the pit lane, so I think Jörg Manny may have picked up a penalty for too many incident points, and that's what's seen him in the pit lane. Andrew Love did stop for fuel. Samoa's going to lead the way to the white flag, and this is it. This is where we see the battle, and last week, we saw that driver in third place in about the same position. Jörg Manny was there, and the 2 leaders took themselves out with just a couple corners left to go, and third place ended up winning the race. So Jason Green cannot give up yet.
Yeah, he should not be given up in that 160 car. He won't be able to catch him up in terms of pace, considering that gap has ballooned as of late, but just stay in the discussion. When we look at Felix Samoas, and I've mentioned how he only has 2 wins thus far this season, even though he's had the pace to win several, let's look through some of the disappointment that Felix Samoas has felt thus far this season. Really, it was back-to-back. The 2 races in Belgium for races number 3 and 4 of this season was leading right towards the end of Spa. Got involved in an incident with himself and Aleix Pleva. Pleva took the checkered flag as your winner. Samoas ended up spun around backwards. Then Zolder the week after. He was leading heading through the final chicane, but picked up a slowdown in the dying breaths of that race. And Osol Al-Shutwi winning in a photo finish, getting a slowdown through the final chicane. So Felix Samoas, as much as he has started this last lap and has completed half of this final lap in the race lead, he still is not going to be counting his chickens before they hatch. I want to see that number 31 car go under that starter stand, take the checkered flag with Barney waving that flag, until I can say that Samoas is your race winner.
Oh.
He runs wide heading through Spoon. That's going to be the opportunity that Nazelli needs in that 44 car. Taking a shallow line, though. Might not have a good exit, though. There you can see he's able to tuck back into the slipstream of Felix Samoas, which is a smart call. Get that draft. Side by side now, heading down the back straightaway. Nazelli on that inside line. Samoas on the outside, heading into 130R for the final time. Look at this close quarter stuff. Samoas having to run wide. He's off into the track.
No.
Contact being made. He spins him into the wall. Contact with both of those racers. Nazelli, a huge hit into the wall. Samoas going to be leading it. That is not the way that any of us want to see the end of this race go. Samoas has felt some frustration in the past. I think he felt some more there, and I think it boiled over. Samoas is your winner in controversial circumstances.
Yeah, provisionally going to get the win. I suspect that once the stewards get their hands on that replay, that Jason Green will end up winning this race after the fact, not the way any driver wants to see this race. And we see the top 10 coming across the line now. Dan Witzak, I got to shout out. What a race out of that guy. Pretty quietly made up 12 or 13 positions over the course of this race, as we see David Jarvis and Daniel Wood in a drag race to the finish line. And it looks like Jarvis won that one, but yeah, not the way you want to see this race end.
I'm going to be completely honest. I am going to close off this broadcast under the belief that Jason Green is going to be scored as your winner. That was, I mean, I say this as someone who has commentated many a race with Felix Samoas, from Radical SR10 action on the iRacing platform to here with the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. We're going to take a look at another replay of this and the being and banging doors between these 2 racers. Nazelli, he didn't push him off the track.
There's a lot of things to say about this, and we really do need to wait to see what the stewards say about it, because Felix Samoas is way off track and then attempts to rejoin, and Maurizio Nazelli is not clear of him yet. And there's contact there. I'm sure that Felix is not meaning to make the contact and was just trying to come over as quickly as possible to try to fight back going into the Casio triangle, and it just didn't work out. But really not necessary. They did try to go too wide through 130R, which is always a dodgy proposition. Felix carried way too much speed and put him off the track. I think at that point you kind of need to say, all right, well, I've lost it on my own, and let Maurizio get in front of you before you try to rejoin.
Yeah, there's some more drama on that last lap. We're going to take a look in a moment involving Brad Cathcart in the 905 car that's heading off into Spoon Curve, trying to get the move done on the inside. Contact being made at Spence sent both of those cars around. Nearly, Cathcart saved it, and I'm not sure who that was. Cathcart stopping and allowing Alan McCain to get spun around in the right direction without him losing out on any sort of position. Brad Cathcart playing the sportsman role there and just allowing that to happen.
Yeah, I don't want to hammer too much on the incident for the lead, since it did decide the race, it's a very important thing to point out. It did appear to me that Felix Simoes did lift after the incident to try to let Maurizio have the position back, but Maurizio wasn't able to save the car, and it had such heavy impact with the barrier that there was no way that he was going to be able to get going again in a sane or very timely manner. So Felix Simoes did have to carry on, but from the angle that we had, in my perspective, it does look like Felix Simoes did lift after the incident to try to give the spot back to Maurizio Naselli, but it was never going to happen.
Yeah, considering the major contact, I'm not entirely sure where Maurizio Naselli finished, if he did. I'm actually looking through the other live timing tower right now. Naselli, his car was completely wrecked as a result of that collision. He, I believe, ended up all the way down in 29th. Let's take a look at the results. Felix Simoes crosses the start-finish line in first to win this race. I would eat a shoe if that stays. Jason Green going to be classed in P2. Ben Rycroft will end up on the overall podium regardless as a Spec 2 driver, winning this race in the Spec 2 category. We have Alace Pleva finishing right behind in fourth. Trent Kramer going to round out your top five as they cross the line. Michael Odell probably a little bit disappointed with how things went for him at the end of this race. He ends up in sixth in front of Joel Tabino in seventh, Dan Witzak in seventh. Antonio Reese takes the win in the Masters category, finishing this race in ninth in the 914 car. That's a really impressive performance for him. First time he's won a race here in the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors in the Masters class since Summit Point about a month ago, so well done to Reese. Tortolo going to round out your top 10 as they cross the line. David Jarvis going to be classed in 11th, Daniel Wood in 12th, Joachim Osbeck finishes in P13, Andre Vivini in 14th, and rounding out your first half of the field is going to be Scott Russell and Tom Gradwell.
Kurt Nunez comes home 17th, with Domenico Massi going to be finishing in 18th overall. 19th position sees Alan McCain. 20th, Brad Cathcart, we saw involved in that incident there at the end of the race. Jeff Jacobson in 21st. Matt Thompson tried. He was doing really good until 130R bit him. Finishes in 22nd. 23rd, Andrew Love, who we saw had to come in for a splash and dash at the end. He wins the Thompson Trophy for fuel management this week here for the Spec Racer Fords. Jörg Manny, who the janitor decided to clean up some of the marbles on the outside of the hairpin at the wrong time, got some heavy damage to the car, ended up having to take a drive-through penalty, finishes 24th. 25th, his first race in the Motion Sim. Aid Allen, Pablo Brim, and 27th, Paul Jackson. Maurizio Naselli ends up being scored in 28th position, the first car a lap down since he did not complete that last lap. Joseph Tarantino in 29th, Adam Bradshaw 30th, Nanand Ulep in 31st, Russell Telker 32nd, Joshua Wilkie, another snake bit day for him, in 33rd, and Kane Lasky gonna finish in 34th.
And that is going to round out your results from this Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race at Suzuka. I don't know what it is about these tracks this season that start with S, but they seem to give us some controversial finishes to be sure. Got some drivers waiting in the interview waiting area, and I'm split as to who we should bring in first. Oh boy, because it's tough. We got Felix Simoes and Jason Green up there in the interview waiting area. I think we're going to hold off on bringing in either of those drivers, one of which may be the Spec 1 winner, the other of which may not. So I think we're going to start off by having a chat with Michael Odell at the start of these interviews. Michael, welcome into the commentary booth. It's probably not the win that you had in mind, but still a really good performance here at Suzuka. Talk us through it.
Honestly, it was a good performance. I could have done a little bit more, especially with you guys. I don't know if it saw in the relative. I dropped when I into turn 1, gave it a little bit too much brake, and I almost formula drifted a Spec forward, but they're not formula drift, and I spun it round, which gave I think it was Ben, gave Ben the position and the overall for Spec 2. Kudos to him. He was fast. He was really fast. The biggest thing was just as long as I could stay with the Spec 1 guys and just stay in their draft, see the line, see how they're doing the corners, and just study that. It seemed like I had a good race going until that spin. But spin included, I'm happy with 6th. That was a solid run.
It looked like a really hard-fought day from all you drivers up and down the grid. I want to ask you about the challenges of this race. Visibility down to a minimum, the relative humidity making the track feel like it was a slick track more than anything else. So what was the hardest part about tackling this race here at Suzuka today?
Honestly, the hardest part was the off tracks and the actual track conditions itself, because like you said, it was a very slick track. So to a point, it was relatively good, but after that said point, it was just, nope, you don't have traction. You're going to off-track it. But visibility, I would blow up my computer if I had it turned up too high, so fog wasn't really a concern. It was more of just keeping the car on the track and then making sure to minimize the mistakes on the curbing, as there were some curbs you had to hit really hard to get good rotation, but there was others that you so much as brush them and they send you flying.
And we mentioned some very good things about the track around here. I'm certainly a fan of Suzuka, and it looked like a lot of these drivers that you were on track with were a fan of it as well. But we're going to be heading to a rather different track in the form of VIR in 1 week's time. So what are your thoughts heading into that race?
Honestly, I don't have major thoughts yet. It's a track of mine that I do like. It's one I've spent a good amount of time in iRacing and GT3 and 4 machinery, but also it will be a fun track to take the Ford to, solely on the fact that that could be good practice for the Super Tour in April, because we will be heading there as well. So it would be really good to get a baseline of how to race people in a Spec Ford there, as it's of course going to be different with GT machinery or prototype machinery. With Spec Ford, at least, kind of see the lay of the land, how the track goes, how the car wants to overtake or really fuel save around that track. So it'll be good. It'll be really good.
And keeping our fingers crossed here, just from my perspective as a commentator, that race is going to be a fun one in 1 week's time. But Michael Odell, thank you so much for joining us in the commentary booth. And before we let you go and decompress after this race here at Suzuka, is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
As always, thanks to the mom and dad. Always cool to have them watching the races and just supporting me through all this. And thanks to you guys and everyone putting on the show. If you guys weren't here, that we wouldn't have a show and wouldn't have a group to race with. So much appreciated.
Well, thank you for the kind words there, Michael, and well done on the hard-fought drive here at Suzuka today. Thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you.
And that right there was Michael Odell, your P2 finisher in the Spec 2 category at the end of this race. Now, Randall, got a lot of drivers up there in the interview waiting area. I'll let you have dibs on who you want to bring in next.
I'm going to give you the spicy one, and I'm going to talk to our Masters Division winner, Antonio Reese. Antonio, you were engaged in a hot battle for most of this race. In most of that time, it included your teammate and rival, Jörg Manny, until the end. Tell us what it was like out there for you today.
Good night, guys. Anyway, good morning. I don't know. Hello, everyone, all the Weekend Warriors family and friends. It was... I really enjoyed this Suzuka track for some reason. It's kind of one of the tracks that I really appreciate, and We have fun. We have some. Yeah, sorry for the money accident on the exit of that little tight corner. It was very unfortunately stuff. Then he could be the winner on the Masters. Other than not happen. That wrong move. But anyway, it is what it is.
So you end up coming home with the victory today. What was the biggest challenge for you out there on track? This is a very tricky track, and you were dealing with traffic the whole time. What did you struggle with the most?
To keep the car alive on most of the hard braking zones, and on the exit of the few corners, the fast corners as well, and stay away from hitting anyone, or you never know when someone can hit you by accidentally something. But I just try not to hit anyone. That was my most strong concern on the track, dealing with the traffic.
Next week, you guys take to the confines of Virginia International Raceway, one of my favorite tracks of all time. What do you feel about that one?
Oh, I love the VIR as well. So I hope we have a good time together as today.
All right, before we let you go celebrate this win, is there anybody you'd like to thank or shout out?
Yeah, shout out for the Steve Ray, our father of the series, and for you guys, the sim broadcast slow motion, and for the viewers, the drivers, all the Weekend Warriors community, and the YouTube viewers as well, and the sponsors. Don't forget.
Oh, the sponsors. Yeah, you can never forget the sponsors. Well, congratulations again on your victory here today, and hopefully we'll be talking to you again soon throughout the rest of the season.
Thank you for having me, and see you next time if I get a chance. Okay.
That was your Masters Division winner, Antonio Reese, and Ron. I think we got a spicy one loaded up here.
That we do, which, considering it's me conducting the interview and it's going to be spicy, is a recipe for disaster. One time I've been to a jalapeno as a kid, I stuck my ice pack to a tongue stuck my tongue to an ice pack afterwards. I completely butchered that line because I don't even know what to say. Welcome to the Jerry Springer Show, folks. Felix Samoa is now joining us in the commentary booth, and now Felix, I'm gonna firstly ask you about this race leading up to the end of it. Discounting the incident in the final few corners, how was the race for you before then?
Hello. The race was pretty okay. I mean, nothing special. It was clear from the start that there was this pack of 3 cars with Jason, me, and Maurizio. So it would be between the 3 of us. After the pit stops, Jason dropped, and was just me and Maurizio. And then this draft tracks is always on the last stretch. It's always like this. And I seem to this season to be involved in every single one of these problems. So I really need to reconsider my participation in these races because it's becoming annoying. You asked me until this last until the crash. I'm already getting ahead of myself. Sorry.
No, it's quite alright. It was obviously, the end of the race. It was just ugly heading off through that final section. I want to ask you about the contact that was made with yourself and Maurizio, the curb. We saw a lot of drivers get affected by that. I think I saw you get affected by that early on in the race. I want to ask you if that had any kind of role in what caused all that to happen coming to the end.
I didn't get that. What? Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
I was mentioning the exit. It's all right. Don't worry. We saw the exit curb coming out of 130 yards.
Yes.
Affect a lot of the drivers up and down the grid.
To be honest,
that?
Yeah. No, I did it on purpose because I did not want to get on that last stretch straight in front of him. So I slowed. I took a wider line so that there wasn't, so that he would be as close as me as possible to not leapfrog me. So I did it on purpose. So I used the tactics I could use being in front in a situation like this. And that part I think was okay. What was not okay was what happened afterwards. I went way too fast into 130R, and then I used VR and I was not looking to the side, and the field of view is quite limited. And when I went to go back into the racetrack, I only saw Mauricio's car when I hit him. So I should have looked to the side. I didn't. I kind of expected him to give me room. Maybe he couldn't. I don't know. I didn't watch the replay from his car. And then that happened. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, it was just unfortunate regardless. It was looking like a really good fight between you two, and just close quarter stuff at the end of these races and stuff like that happens from time to time. It's unfortunate, but just gotta dust ourselves off and look forward to VIR in 1 week's time. Going to be a much different track to this, still with that drift effect. So what are your thoughts heading into that race in 1 week's time?
I like VIR a lot, but I fear it's going to be the same thing. It will all come down to the last pass on the back straight, and braking for, I don't know, what's it called, that section afterwards. Maybe you can still try to overtake from the last corner until the start finish straight, because there's a good run until there. But I think these races, these draft tracks with these cars, it's like that. And yeah, I made the mistake of. I'm sorry. I'm going back again to the problem. I'm really upset. I'm upset with myself. I'm upset with the whole situation. I won the race, but I'm not enjoying it. I wish I didn't. Sorry.
Don't worry, man. It's okay. At the end of these races, a lot of people are like, yeah, it's sim racing. The emotions don't really matter. I may be a little bit biased as an iRacing commentator, but just because the race cars aren't real doesn't mean the emotions aren't. And I gotta say one thing as well. A lot of people are obviously going to have their opinions about this, but Felix, I've covered a lot of races with you. One of the first Weekend Warriors races I ever did, I'm pretty sure, was one that you took the checkered flag in about 2 years ago at this point at Road Atlanta. I know the driver that you are. Obviously, it's not my decision in terms of what comes out of this race and what doesn't, but I know that you're a fast driver. You've proved that throughout this season, so I hope that from this incident, there isn't too big of a fallout, because it's close quarters stuff, obviously not intentional from your perspective. It's unfortunate regardless, but hopefully this doesn't evolve into too much of a shiitake mushroom show out of the fallout from this. But Felix,
thank you.
I'll let you.
I'm sorry, I don't want to extend this too much, but I just want to say a word. I messaged Maurizio immediately after the race, and he said, no problem. Maurizio is a gentleman, has always been. So there will be no problem between me and Mauricio because of this. That's not because, as I said, Mauricio is a gentleman. Always has been from all these many years I raced with him. Yeah, I'm just upset with myself. But thank you anyway.
And thank you as well for joining us in the commentary booth, Felix. It takes some balls to come into the booth after that. So I give you a hell of a lot of credit for coming in and talking to us at the end of that race. So thank you very much for joining us here in the commentary booth, Felix, and hope to see you back out on the track for the rest of the season. Thank you for joining us. And that right there was Felix Samoas, who crossed the start-finish line in first. We will not be able to get official word as to whether or not that result will stand, but come time for the next race of this season at VIR, we will be able to tell you as to any sort of penalties or stuff like that has coming out of this race. But Randall, a controversial one at Suzuka here today, but we got VIR to look forward to in 1 week's time, and that's going to be some fun.
It absolutely will be, and like Felix said, it's another one of those tracks where you're going to have a big slipstream overtake and decide the race on the last lap. Like he said, the run up to the roller coaster is a massive straightaway. There will be slipstream. I wouldn't be shocked if we see them going 3 wide for the win, going into the roller coaster, and who survives that is going to be the one that's going to drive out a hog pen with the checkered flag waving in the air. So it's going to be another great race to watch. He said these slipstream tracks are really throwing a wrench in his plans, and I don't want to harp too much on anybody, but the cars in this range, they don't have a lot of power, and just about every track becomes a slipstream track once you get below a certain amount of horsepower. So it's something maybe need to practice a bit more for to keep finding yourself involved in these incidents in slipstream tracks, because it's going to be most of the calendar.
Yeah, these Spec Racer Ford races, they're draft fest if ever you see them. Puts on some very good racing, but occasionally come time for the end of these races, stuff like that can happen. It's unfortunate, but it's racing. Stuff like that will happen from time to time. And I'll be honest, folks, I got paid for a while to sort this stuff out doing race control for a rather, I wouldn't say big, multi-class sports car racing series on iRacing, but it's not necessarily small either. We saw some pretty big grids, and I left that because I didn't want to piss off any drivers, so I'm going to keep that streak going, because frankly, I'm here to talk about race cars. I'm not here to be Jerry Springer and stoke some crap between some drivers and light some dumpsters on fire as a result of all of it. But still, it's an unfortunate way for a race to come to an end, but still, we had some fantastic racing all throughout today. The same great racing action that you can catch every single weekend here on Slow Motion Broadcasting. And in fact, with this, the racing action doesn't even end. Coming up later on this evening, or possibly tomorrow morning if you're in Europe, we got the return of the XSLR series. We got some 410 sprint car action at Knoxville coming up later on this evening. I hope all of you will be there to watch that broadcast. I'm going to be on the call for that, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll tell you what, to invoke a little bit of lightheartedness back into this broadcast before we wrap it up, that's going to be the second time I have ever done a dirt racing broadcast. Second only to doing the iRacing Chili Bowl broadcast. So I have no idea why they put me on that show, but they somehow did anyways, and I will leave it at that. And so for myself, Ron Maunz, Randall McGrew joining me in the commentary booth, and Guido Marzucchi doing a fine job working on the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you all wherever it is in the not too distant future.